Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. My name is Robert Martin, and today we are here to talk about the SEC, the probably the biggest and probably the toughest conference in college football, the Southeastern Conference. I am joined, as always, by my co-host at BuckMetrics. How are you doing tonight?
I am embarrassed and ashamed, and I hope you are as well. You might remember last time we talked about the SEC in detail. You and I both had Georgia going 7-5 in the preseason pod, and Kirby just called us out on it. I felt like he was talking to me directly. Did you take it
Yeah,
personally as well?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was us. We said that. I feel so bad now. We
Yeah.
definitely didn't believe in Georgia. We were like, nah, like 7-5.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't even make a bowl. 50-50. But man, were we wrong there. So, anyways, I'm happy to announce our guest today, Brendan Moore. He's going to help us preview the SEC. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. It just means more in the SEC, right?
It does. It does, in fact, just mean more, especially when they are kind of the ones who started conference realignment. But yeah, it's good to. This is the thing. This is going to be the last year of the SEC in this current format. Obviously, next year they'll be adding Texas and Oklahoma, and then a bunch of other stuff happened. But that kind of was a result, somewhat vaguely, of Texas and Oklahoma. But man, this is one of the big two conferences in the country, and that's is. It doesn't matter what happens with Florida State and Clemson and whatever. This is still one of the top two conferences, and it will be for quite a long time. So this is in many ways kind of the heart of college football here in the SEC. So, but anyways, before we get into the SEC, we are going to do the same thing we've done with all of our other guests. We're going to give you a little bit of interview just to kind of get to know you. So, what's your team in college football?
So I grew up, I fell in love with the sport watching Michigan State in the mid 2010s, or in the early 2010s, actually, when they were really good, when they went to the Rose Bowl and went to the college football playoff and the Cotton Bowl in 13, 14, and 15. That's when I fell in love with the sport. So I'm a Michigan State fan. I also cover the team, so I try to remain a little bit unbiased there. So it's a tough balance between covering the team and kind of being a fan. So, yeah, my team's always been Michigan State.
Hey, don't listen to our Big Ten preview. Then I'll just say that we're kind of mean to talk.
Uh-oh.
And I know you've got to stay neutral. So outside of your own team, do you have another one that you kind of find as your favorite?
I mean, I'll gravitate towards a lot of the underdogs. Like, it's hard not to root for TCU last year. Like, how could you not root for a team like the Horned Frogs, like the Cinderella run that they had last year? Same thing with Cincinnati 2 years ago. So it depends on the year. I really don't have like a second team or anything like that. It just really depends on the year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think everybody had, especially against Michigan, I think everybody was kind of like they were pretty high on the Horned Frogs there. What do you think is the best logo in college football? And then, if not the same, then also what's the best helmet?
I like this question. So I went through, looked at some uniforms, looked at some helmets, looked at some logos, obviously. I narrowed it down to probably, I think I got like half dozen teams here. I like East Carolina is at the top of my list. I love the Pirates. Crossbones, the colors are sweet with the purple, the black, the gold. Wyoming's another one. I mean, how could you not like the logo with the cowboy riding the horse? That's sweet. I've always loved UCF's uniform specifically. The logo's okay, but the uniform specifically, I love the black and gold color combination. Also, Florida State, I really like Seminoles. Logo's cool. Chief Osceola's sweet, and Renegade the horse and the riding in the flaming spear to start the game. I've always loved that with Florida State. A couple other logos that I think are sweet are Tulane with the angry wave. I think, and their color combination, green and the powder blue and white. I mean,
Yeah.
what other team has that color combination in college sports, pro sports, whatever? UAB also has a great logo. Same thing with Coastal Carolina. So I'd say those 6 to 7 teams are probably my favorite logos / uniforms / helmets.
You're the second to say Wyoming or to mention Wyoming, and the third to mention Tulane, which is the correct answer in my opinion. That was mine. So, who would you have on your Mount Rushmore of college football?
Man, that's a tough question. Since I've only been watching the sport for probably like 10 years, I'm pretty young compared to the other people that cover the sport. Uh, so on my Mount Rushmore, I'm just going to go with people I've seen on TV. I think Joe Burrow has to be up there. Obviously, Heisman Trophy winner, led LSU to an undefeated season, national championship. So he's got to be there. I think Derrick Henry was one of the first players I started watching where it's like, holy crap, nobody can stop this guy. He won the Heisman as well. So Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry. Oh man, gosh, it's tough. I might have to go back to that 2019 LSU team, and either Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson both were pretty unstoppable. Uh, those two you got to throw in there. Am I leaving anyone out? You guys think?
No, I think you hit a lot of them there. Yeah.
I would give you a hard time if you put Tucker on there. So yeah.
So I think, and we may know the answer to this one based off of the last question. Or no, does somebody? Oh, maybe okay. Who do you love? Who do you love most? What do you love most about
What
college
do you
football?
love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the regular season. Like it's the best regular season in sports. Like what other sport has a regular season that has this highest stakes on each regular season game? I know people will point to Alabama versus the Citadel means nothing, but okay, that's fine. But 12 regular season games, very little breathing room. If you lose a game, you could be knocked out of national championship contention. I mean, what other sport has that? NFL, you have to lose, you know, 7 or 8 games out of a 17 game season to be knocked out of the playoffs. NBA, it's obviously an 82 game season. Same thing with NHL. MLB is a different story. It's like 162 games. So there's just no other sport that has a meaningful regular season as college football, and just the rivalries and the passion and like there's more. I feel like connection with the fans to the team as opposed to pro sports. Like you're rooting for. It's more small towns. You know, it's Auburn, Alabama. It's Tuscaloosa. It's Athens, Georgia. It's not Atlanta or Miami or Dallas. It's these small towns, and that's I just think it's cool about college football.
I agree, and I kind of answered it in a similar way, and I kind of put it as that is for most schools the identity. Like if you say Auburn beat Alabama, you don't have to say in football, but any other sport you have to say in basketball, in volleyball, in whatever. It just kind of is like the assumed sport. So what's your favorite college football moment?
Sticking with the SEC theme, I think one of the moments that really stood out from when I first started watching was the kick six. I mean, there's really nothing that can top that moment. You beat your in-state rival, your biggest rival, and to go to the SEC championship game to knock them out from national title and SEC title contention. I mean, nothing's really going to top that moment. But one that came close for me personally was the trouble with the snap. Also a great finish. Michigan State beat their in-state rival, stayed alive with their undefeated season, went on to make the college football playoff that year. So those two are definitely my top 2 moments. And notice how it's both regular season. It's not any team winning the national championship. So,
okay. What? Which college game day do you want to most experience?
Yeah, so I've experienced some Big Ten game days. Michigan State obviously been there a lot, but I would love to visit some SEC stadiums. Death Valley at night at LSU is one of them. That's at the top of my list. A big game at Neyland Stadium would be another one at the top of my list. Like Tennessee versus Alabama last year would have been a great one to go to. Just some of those big game environments in the SEC, and maybe even Iron Bowl at Alabama or Auburn. Getting down to the Swamp would be sweet. So, and just some of those big game or big time programs in the SEC, I would love to get down to.
Again, we didn't say a postseason. We said a regular season venue, right? Interesting.
Exactly. It's a common theme, yeah.
Yeah, I might have an idea about this based on your Mount Rushmore. What do you consider to be the best college football team that you've seen, either in person or on TV?
Yeah, I'll say one for on TV. It's 2019 LSU. I was doubtful with the defense early on in the season, but as the season progressed, it's like okay, defense is coming along. They can win this thing. They had a ton of talent. Like you go down up and down that roster, there's so many guys performing at a high level in the NFL right now. That was on that roster, and in person, I haven't been to a ton of games, so it was 2022 Ohio State, last year's Ohio State team. But just focusing on the receiver room, Marvin
Yeah.
Harrison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Amika Ekbuka, they were absolutely stacked, and seeing them in person was cool. I know obviously CJ Stroud is on that team as well, so seeing just all that talent on the field in person was pretty cool.
Um, yeah, I think I also said LSU 2018 LSU too. I think that team was just
Yeah.
was ridiculous.
You also said the kick six.
I also did say the kick six. Yes, I guess the yeah. But I also said Florida had the best logo, so no one has said that. Interestingly enough, though, I still think logo's really good though. But anyways, which movie have you seen the most?
Growing up, I've always been a big Star Wars guy. So I mean, just I haven't seen a ton of them recently. But when I was younger, I would always watch them whenever they're on TV, or I have all the DVDs, so I'd throw it on whenever I was bored. So Star Wars was always my go-to movie. But nowadays, I mean, if Forrest Gump is on TV, I'm throwing that on. Really, I'm a big comedy movie guy, so any comedy movie that's on, I've seen it pretty much.
Okay. And what's your non-political message to make the world a better place?
Oh man, that's a good question. Seeing as I'm on Twitter and I get a fair amount of hate for my predictions and whatnot, I'd say just know that what you say matters and your voice is heard. That can be good and that can be bad, because if your message is bad and you're hurtful, that can affect people, right? But if it's good, it can also affect people in a good way. So just know that your words matter, both good, and it can affect people in a good way and a bad way.
That was directed at me, wasn't it? I'm kidding.
Absolutely not. It was not.
I direct that at myself. All right, cool. Thanks for that. Before we get into the team previews, instead of an SEC overview, this is a little bit of an SEC history moment. And if either of you guys have an idea what I'm talking about, just kind of chime in. I'm just kind of curious if either of you know where I'm going with this. So in the first episode of the preseason, I mentioned that what I love about college football the most is that a lot of it is a celebration of, like, basically a village having a village festival and showing their love for and pride in their village. So along those lines, here's a little bit of history. In 1968, a bluegrass band named the Osborne Brothers wrote a song about their hometown of Gatlinburg. This is a real bluegrass band. The instruments used in recording this song were a mandolin, a banjo, a guitar, a bass, and a fiddle. This is serious, like, Appalachia stuff. The song is a celebration of the simple life, of the love of home. It is a reminder that there is more to life than the city lights and big city dreams. The lyrics describe the beauty of Gatlinburg and the sense of community that the people there feel. The song was played in the halftime show on the third Saturday of October in 1972, and it was met with an extremely positive reaction from the fans. Later, band director W.J. Julin said that not playing the song from that point forward would have caused a mutiny among the fans. You likely know this song. Gatlinburg is in the Smoky Mountains region of Tennessee, and the name of the song is Rocky Top. I think that's so cool that this little bluegrass band wrote this song about their simple home, and now it's like you hear it like 50 times a game at Neyland, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is pretty crazy. Yeah.
I was shocked. If you just Google Rocky Top, I'm thinking that they're bands, and you get, literally a guy playing a violin and a mandolin. All right. One thing that stood out to us about the SEC was, I'll just say it's an interesting year for the quarterbacks in the SEC. So you might remember that Robert and I ranked our SEC quarterback rooms. We didn't want to have Brandon go through all 14 of his. So we've asked him to... I'm going to share my screen here. We've asked him to give us his top 7
because 14 took way too long. We did it the first time.
14 is not fair. So, if I guess let's just start with number 1, if you would, Brandon, or Brendan. Pardon me.
Yeah, I just want to put a disclaimer before I share mine. And I'm glad we did do 14 because I would have found it impossible to rank quarterback rooms like Georgia and like Alabama because we haven't seen a lot of those guys play meaningful snaps yet. So I
Yeah.
did not include any of those in my top seven just because we don't know. Like, we don't know what Jalen Milrow is going to do or if he's even going to start. Is it going to be Ty Simpson? Is it going to be Tyler Buckner? Same thing with Georgia. We would assume Beck, but we don't know what we're going to see out of Carson Beck this year. So I put in a lot of proven guys in my top seven. So I'll start. You said start
Okay.
with one.
Yeah, please.
I believe, actually, before we do this, I believe we are going to fill this in as we go. I believe we have the
Yeah.
technology. So yes, okay, let's
Yep.
go.
Okay, I see your guys' number one right there. It's LSU, and that's my number one as well. I think you got Jane Daniels, who I think is the best quarterback in the SEC. True dual threat guy. I think he needs to stretch the field a little bit more this year. But as the year progressed, last year he started to do that, and you started to see LSU's offense get better as the year went on. So I like Jaden Daniels. I think he's the best quarterback in the SEC. He's a tremendous athlete as well. Also behind him, you got a guy Garrett Nussmeier who would start at, I think, probably a majority of
Yeah.
Power Five schools. So he's a Power Five starting quarterback. There's no doubt about it. So LSU, I think, is number one.
Yep. Agree. No disagreement there. Let's see if you. Let's see how
That
long we
wasn't
agree for here.
one and two aren't the interesting ones. It starts at three.
Yeah.
What's your second one?
Well, number two, we have a little bit of a disagreement here. I put
Oh,
Mississippi State
Yeah.
at number two.
oh
So
wow,
I'm a
okay.
big fan of Will Rogers. He's I mean, I know they're moving from the air raid to more of a pro style offense, so that'll be a little bit of an adjustment for him because he played the air raid in high school. So yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see what he does this year. But going into the year, obviously this is fluid. Mississippi State could move down in these rankings as the year progresses. But going into the year, I have them at number two. Part of that's because of Will Rogers' throwing ability, but also part of that's his backup. I like Mike Wright. He's a Vanderbilt transfer. He's a big
That's right.
guy. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a he's a good athlete as well. Can run a little bit. So if Will Rogers does go down, God forbid, obviously we don't want to root for injuries here. But Mike Wright's a guy that I feel like Mississippi State can depend on, and they can throw him in there.
One thought about that is that just shows right away how tough of an exercise this is that you've got a guy in a completely new system that he's really not played in. And that's your number two QB room. Interesting. Kind of emblematic of what I saw when I first cracked open the Phil Steele guide and saw the QBs here.
My only
All right.
thing,
Oh
actually,
yeah.
I'll quickly add to that. My only reason why you have Buck has him at six, and Brendan, you have him at two. The only reason I didn't have him in my top seven was because I felt like at the end of the year, defenses kind of started to figure him out a little bit. He got completely shut down by LSU, completely shut down by Alabama. Um, he was really good against a bunch of bad defenses, but I think they started to figure out how to shut him down. And I think the answer was just kind of drop seven. I think is what they started doing. So that's why I kind of limit him a little bit there because I want to see that ability for him to adapt to maybe other like stronger defenses. But he is up there. But that's why I kind of put him a bit lower because I think maybe they started to figure him out a bit.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think you'll really know more about Will Rogers this season. How can he adjust to the new offense going from air raid, like I said, to a little bit more of a pro style? So yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see what he does this year.
All right, number three.
Yeah, I'm going with Tennessee at three. I don't trust Joe Milton a ton. He's tremendous arm talent, as everyone's pointed out. But he can throw the fastball. Can he throw the changeup? Right? Can he throw the 10-yard slant, the 10-yard in, whatever it may be? So that's what I'm worried about with Joe Milton. He's got the arm talent. He's got all the tools you need, but can he throw that off-speed pitch? He can throw the fastball. Can he throw the off-speed? Can he locate it? But I like his backup, Nico Iamaleava. Hopefully I pronounced that right after butchering it. I think he was a 5-star recruit coming in as a true freshman. So I honestly would not be worried if he comes in and plays for Tennessee this year. At some point, if Milton gets banged up, he's super talented. Apparently, he's impressing in fall camp. So, yeah, if Milton goes down, I'm sure Iamaleava will be the backup, and I think Tennessee's got some quarterback depth.
I've got some more about Mr. Milton later, so I don't want to spoil that. Nico's the guy. I think he got like a $6 million NIL deal or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So, okay. Number 4.
Number 4, I'm going with Ole Miss. I would rank them higher if they had more high end quarterback play, but I think they just got depth throughout. They got 3 guys that can start, but I don't think they can start and play at a high level where they're going to take Ole Miss to like 9 or 10 wins. So Jackson Dart is my guess. I think he'll start this season. He's good. He's not as good as Matt Corral was for Ole Miss in 2021. But you also bring in Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. I mean, he's got like 3-4 years of experience. I mean, the guy's been through it all at Oklahoma State. It seems like he's entering his like 10th year of eligibility this year. And then you also got Walker Howard, who's a transfer from LSU, who, like I said about Nussmeier, I think Howard could start at some Power 5 programs right now. So I think you got 3 guys that are Power 5 quality starting quarterbacks, but neither of them are really top 3-4 SEC quarterbacks. I think just there's good depth throughout, and interesting that all 3 guys are transfers. So I think Lane Kiffin's truly the king of the transfer portal.
Yeah. Robert, you want to mention anything since you're a big fan of Spencer Sanders?
No, see. The other thing is this does involve depth. I wasn't the biggest fan of Jackson Dart last year. You make a good comparison with Corral. He's not as strong as Corral was at Ole Miss. He's okay, but I would rather take some of the other starters ahead of Jackson Dart. And then, as you can see, I don't even have Mississippi in my top 7. I actually don't even know what my 8th one is, but no, I didn't have them there because I think. Like, of the other ones, I'd probably take them above Dart, and I don't put a lot of weight on Spencer Sanders, so. But.
Interesting, too.
Yeah.
We're still in the top, 30%, and you're already seeing things like, yeah, he's okay, but not great.
Yeah. All of it. We're all universally saying, like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right,
a lot of this
5.
is
sorry.
a lot of this is balancing depth versus who's your starting quarterback and just ranking the top 7 quarterbacks, because I think 5, 6, and 7, I would take their starting quarterbacks, who I'm about to rank 5, 6, and 7. I'd take their starting quarterbacks over Jackson Dart and probably even over Joe Milton. But I just think Tennessee and Ole Miss has better depth throughout. So when you ask me to rank quarterback rooms, I look more so at depth. That's just my perspective.
Yep.
No, exactly. No,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Then who do you have at number 5 then?
I got Arkansas at 5. I like KJ Jefferson. I think he's
Okay.
going to have a big bounce back year this year. I think you really have to include him in the top 5, in my opinion. He can make plays with his legs. He can make plays with his arms. And this year, I'm just looking for more health from the Arkansas team overall. I think they'll have a nice bounce back year. I think they'll have a winning season here. So I like KJ Jefferson to have a good year this year.
They lost. I think Hornsby was their backup, and I only know that because I think he's projected to start for Texas State, so they might be a little thin behind him. It sounds like. Is that fair? I'm guessing.
Yeah, they got Cade Fortin. I think is how you pronounce his last name. So
Actually, that name's a bit familiar.
it's a bit familiar. I don't think he's really played meaningful snaps before, but like I said, I like I like Ole Miss, Tennessee's, Mississippi State's, and LSU's depth way more than I like Arkansas's depth at the position.
Okay.
Fair.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Number 6.
6.
Number 6, I like South Carolina at 6. I think Spencer Rattler's gotten better as his college career's progressed. He has the talent. It's always been just his mental game. Like, is he focused? Is he at a place where he can get better? I think South Carolina is that place. I think he got better as the year progressed last year. You saw him light up Tennessee. He lit up Clemson. I don't want to say light up Clemson, but he had a good game against Clemson, led them to a win in Death Valley. So I do think Rattler's a top 5 quarterback in the SEC, but I'm worried about the depth behind him. Luke Doty is his backup, I believe. So the depth's a little thin behind him, but I do think Spencer Rattler's a top 5 SEC quarterback, but I have South Carolina as the number 6 quarterback room.
Is Doty that former student manager, or am I conflating him with someone else?
I think he
where
is.
this. Okay, yeah, there was a weird story. Like, I think he actually played against when they barely beat Vanderbilt in Beamer's first season. I'm just not a Rattler believer, but at this point, I can't really disagree with anybody. Any pushback from you on that, Robert?
No, I did have Arkansas. I think I had no, I had South Carolina third, so I had them higher. You didn't even have them in your top seven. So,
Yeah.
uh, but I think Rattler is good enough to be like if Rattler has a good season, there will be NFL talk, maybe like second, third round, maybe fourth round. But there would be an NFL team that takes him eventually if Rattler has a decent season at South Carolina.
Yep. Just going to point out, as I did yesterday on the USC preview, that he had by far the worst season of any starting quarterback under Lincoln Riley, for what it's worth. But that doesn't mean he's not good. Maybe he just, was what would it be? The fattest guy in modeling school? I don't know. All right, number 7.
Yeah, I have Kentucky rounding out my top 7. When you look on the surface and you say, okay, Kentucky lost an NFL quarterback in Will Levis. But look, they brought in Devin Leary, who I think is better than Will Levis. I think they upgraded at the quarterback position, and I also think it's worth noting that they bring Liam Cohn back as the offensive coordinator. I think that will upgrade that quarterback room. I think he's got more weapons around him than Levis did last year. So I like Leary at 7. I think at Kentucky you're going to see a better offense this year. We know they're going to have a good defense. Mark Stoops knows how to coach football. So I like Devin Leary at number 7 there with Kentucky's quarterback room.
Yeah, I agree. And if I had anything to do over, I probably would have ranked them a little higher when I made this list. I really hadn't dug in for the season, and I didn't realize that Leary was hurt. His numbers kind of stunk last season, but I've got more information on him once we get to Kentucky. Interesting though. Appreciate that. Mississippi State. Wow, number 2. That'll be interesting to see. So, okay. From that, we will move to, and this is a really good segue. If I can stop sharing this.
There you go.
We are going to get to my most fascinating team. And that team appeared in nobody's top 7. Not by any coincidence. That team is Alabama. I had Alabama 6th overall in FBS last season, the power rating of 13.9. Offense I had as a plus 7.6. They were actually 15th in Apex, 22nd in ground game above Boston College, so well balanced on offense, and between offense and defense, pretty well balanced too. Defense is a plus 7.4. They had the best pass defense in SEC by my metrics versus the run. Only Georgia and Tennessee were better. Sounds like a typical whatever Nick Saban kind of Alabama team, right? So what's so fascinating about them? First of all, a little bit of context here. I think their 2020 team, going back a few years, of Alabama is probably the most overlooked. They went 13-0 versus 11 SEC teams and Notre Dame and Ohio State. They didn't get the usual SEC, double breather against Wofford and whoever else. That was probably the toughest schedule we're ever going to see anybody play in our lifetime, if you just say no breaks at all. The 2021 team, this is where things get a little interesting for me. They beat a Florida team by only 2 that would basically soon fire Dan Mullen within a few weeks because that team was just so poor. They lost to Texas A&M as an 18-point favorite. They beat an LSU team by only 6 that had announced it was going to fire their coach, but still their coaching. Never seen that before.
I
recall
remember that
they
was
beat
really
overtime.
weird. I remember that. That was so
Yeah.
weird. When they're like, we're going to fire him in like a couple weeks, and people are like, what? Why?
Yeah. So enjoy it.
Yeah.
Then they beat Auburn in 4 overtimes as a 20-point favorite. And you might remember that they really should have lost that game. Brian Harsin, our guy, really did his best to give that game away, and he succeeded. And that was with the Heisman winner. So we went from this immaculate team in 2020 against the toughest schedule anybody's going to have to, 4 really poor showings. We go to the next season, 2022. They had to come back after giving up a lead to Texas with a minute 34 in the game, and they were a 21-point favorite Texas went 8-5 that season. They beat A&M only by 4 at home as a 24-point favorite, and A&M went 5-7. They lose at Tennessee. They lose to LSU 2 games later. What did we hear many times throughout last season? Bryce Young has no help out there. This is on the heels of, I think it was about 2020 or so, 2019, when Alabama at that point had like the greatest recruiting class in the history of mankind. And we're going from that level of talent to there's nobody helping out Bryce Young on offense. It's scary. Last season, there was big regression on both sides of the ball, which really wasn't projected by my experience and improvement metrics. Offense, they went from an 11.4 to 7.6. Defense, 9.6 to 7.4. And I talked about that. The thing is, this is kind of, I've seen this firsthand. I was, right there up close and personal to watch USC's run from 2002 to 2005. And this basically has a lot of the same beats as USC 2007, 8, 9, when they were just at a different level. And just the crappy performances came in much more frequency than you really are used to seeing. And people were still in denial about, oh no, USC is still they're still a top 5 team. And you really just need to see the bottom fall out. Like we saw, I don't know if you'll remember Stanford just pantsing USC in 2009, and then Oregon just dump trucking them a couple of games later. And I think we might be on the precipice of just seeing that. I think we're well along the way. I'm wondering why Tommy Rees is a new offensive coordinator. I kind of saw him as crafty, not an awesome OC. The quarterback room, I think it's a disaster. I don't believe in Buckner. I had Apex was at 78 last season. 100 is an average FBS quarterback. My eyes basically confirm what my numbers say. Milroe, I'm not convinced on his accuracy. I'll just keep it kind like that. He's an awesome athlete. I'm not projecting any improvement for this season based on their returning experience. Maybe Kevin Steele moves the defense up. I am not going to be bold enough to take the under 10.5 wins on Nick Saban, but a lot of people are. 10.5, the under is at -175. So there's a lot of people that are basically fading Nick Saban this season. This could be the big story in the SEC and maybe, college football. So I don't know. What do you think, Brendan? Am I just totally off base here? Am I making a coherent case?
No, you got a point with Alabama. The quarterback room is definitely a concern, but I think you're going to see a little shift in kind of offensive mentality. In the past, 5, 6 years, you look at the quarterbacks they've had: Bryce Young, Tua, Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts. They've been very good passers, elite passers, a couple of Heisman Trophy winners too. So I think you'll start to see a shift more into they want to dominate the line of scrimmage now. I think that's kind of goes along with the Tommy Rees hire from Notre Dame. He's not a flashy offensive coordinator, no, but I think he's going to want to pound the rock. I think you're going to see a shift in offensive mentality from, okay, we're going to let Bryce Young do it all, and to now we're going to pound the rock. We're going to run behind this big offense line. I think they got one of the best offense lines in the country this year. And I think Jalen Milroe is going to be the starter. I'm not totally confident in him passing the ball, like you said. His accuracy is a concern, but I think if you have his athletic ability in the backfield, I think that's important as well to have back there, just so you can get him in the read option game. Because they got Jason McClellan and Roydell Williams at running back, so they got 2 good backs. Milroe can run as well. So I think you're going to see a little bit of shift in offensive mentality here this year.
Yeah, I will add in. I will agree. I have this team as a stairs down team. I see a lot of the same things. I think the most concerning sign was Tyler Buckner actually transferring here in the first place. When I saw that, I was like, "What?" Like again, and as you mentioned it, this has been basically a school that has pumped out first round draft picks on offense and on defense and on quarterbacks. Right? I mean, you go Jalen Hurts, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. Those have all been top 20. Well, actually, no, Jalen Hurts wasn't, but those have all been like basically draft picks, right? And you're telling me, and again, as you mentioned before, Alabama had one of the best recruiting classes ever of all time. Okay, where are they now, right? And I mean, you look through it, you look at the Alabama depth chart there at quarterback. There's like one of the top quarterbacks for every draft class there. Why aren't they starting? You're telling me a single one of them can't beat out Tyler Buckner, who was not particularly great last year, and Jalen Miller, who came in. Now, okay, he did come in when Bryce Young was injured, and they almost lost to Texas A&M. But you're telling me that they're not even better than that guy, and that guy, you're saying that guy was problematic enough that you had to bring in Tyler Buckner. The other best thing is that it's fascinating because you mentioned last year their losses and slash close wins. They're almost lost to Texas. They're almost lost to Texas A&M. They're losing to Tennessee and they're losing to LSU. And also you can throw in there almost losing to Ole Miss. They only lost them. They only beat them by 6 points when they were 11-point favorites, and outright losing to LSU as 13-point favorites. Those are big numbers in there too. And the fact is that offensive performance by Alabama was so impressive last season that their offensive coordinator got hired to be the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. That's also shocking to me. And people this offseason for the NFL, again, this is not college, but kind of an unrelated tangent. People are like, oh, the Patriots, they're going to fix their offense this season. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, but anyway, that's unrelated to this. That's why I'm kind of low on the Patriots. Other people are super high on them. I think that's very weird, but whatever. Back to Alabama. No, I have concerns about this. I mean, Notre Dame's offense was not good last year, and you're like, oh, it's just hire their offensive coordinator. But like, what? The thing is, honestly, and actually, as you look at the numbers, and again, as we mentioned in our last episode, we are working on our own kind of top 25 ranking system. And actually, I have Alabama as the number one rushing team in all of college football last year. And that's also very interesting because, one, I kind of thought that might have been like Texas with Bijan Robinson, but apparently it's Jahmyr Gibbs because Jahmyr Gibbs was a monster last year for Alabama, not just on the run, but also on the pass. He definitely got overlooked a lot, probably because of Alabama not being amazing last year. And so now I'm actually kind of more hyped for the Lions, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you're losing Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
You're not replacing Bryce Young very well at all. And you're losing Will Anderson, who's also amazing on this team as well. And you're doing all this, and now you're preparing, and now you're like, I have huge concerns about this team. I don't think they're the best team in the West. I don't think they're going to win the West. I think LSU can definitely win the West if they want to. And yeah, I'm stares down on this team. I think they're going to have some problems this year.
So to wrap it up on Alabama, I chose a random number here, but it's kind of like my over-under. At the end of the regular season, are they in the top 8? Yes or no? Robert?
I mean, the thing is, because the name is Al. If it was a regular school, that was like 11-2 last year, and then was like this record this year, they wouldn't be in the top 8. But because there's an Alabama name there, and because it's being coached by Nick Saban, they will be. I think there's losses here to LSU and Tennessee, and maybe they'll watch. This is what the misstep's going to be. Watch, they'll beat Texas. They'll cover the spread against Texas. People are like, oh, okay, they're both really good, but in actuality, they're both going to be really bad. Watch out for that one, because that's what's going to happen. They're going to crush Texas. People are like, oh, Alabama crushed Texas, so that means that Alabama's back. They're not. But there's definitely a couple losses here, and then they're going to lose to Tennessee, LSU, and then maybe get upset by like Ole Miss or something. Because Ole Miss is getting closer and closer to beating them. Lane Kiffin's trying to figure it out. So I think there's at least 3 losses. And if they're 3 losses, then they're probably not in the top 8 at the end of the year. They're probably lower than the top 8, but maybe just barely. Because then they'll figure out some excuse to be like, oh, well, they lost to the number 1 or some stupid thing. So they'll find a way to get them up, and even though they're not a top 8 team, they'll find a way to get to the top 8 somehow.
All right. Brendan, do you have them in the top 8 at the end of the regular season?
I do. Yeah, I'm going to be releasing my SEC predictions on August 18th, so I don't know when you guys are putting this out, but it'll be Friday when I post my record predictions. But I think you got to look at the schedule. I think it's very favorable this year compared to last year. Last year they had to go to LSU. Last year they had to go to Texas, and they had to go to Tennessee. This year they get those 3 teams at home, so I think the schedule's more favorable this season. And like I said earlier, I think that offensive line is going to dominate. I don't think they're going to have as good of a passing attack, but I only have them at 1 loss in the regular season. I have them tripping up at Texas A&M.
All right. I'm going to go no, although I can't really disagree with your case. All right, Robert, your Gators and their awesome helmet.
Yes. So whatever. I'll make them my most interesting team, partly because I am a Florida Gator fan, but also because they're actually kind of interesting anyways. I realized now I was going to wear my Florida thing for this preview, but I realized it's a hoodie. and it is in fact August. So maybe not today, but when we do the regular season stuff, when Florida wins a game, I'll wear my in like October because it's still really hot here. It's really hot here in August, even in Canada. But no, so I'll go with Florida as my most interesting team. So this team last year, they basically fired Dan Mullen back in 21, brought in a brand new head coach, Billy Napier, head coach from Louisiana. Louisiana. Um, and they went 6-7, which was arguably better than was actually the same record as the Dan Mullen team, but arguably a better result. They almost took out Tennessee. They lost to Kentucky. It was just a very weird season for them. Again, another weird fact, they had Anthony Richardson, who went number 3 overall to the Indianapolis Colts. That's another, 4, sorry, he went 4th to the Colts. So again, weird because Anthony Richardson was not particularly good. In many reasons, he was there was a lot of very uneven games for Anthony Richardson. In many places, I definitely thought he held them back. So now, you go forward another year, this team has added some pieces. Unfortunately, one of those pieces was Graham Mertz, someone who I'm not particularly high on. However, what we saw last year was we saw Bo Nix leaving Auburn, going to Oregon, fresh start, basically a highly recruited kid, fresh start in a university, did pretty well. There is a chance, a small chance, but there is a chance that we could see something similar with Graham Mertz coming down to Florida that we did with Bo Nix to Oregon. It's a possibility. I don't think it's insanely likely, but there's a chance, and we can't completely discount that chance. Okay, there you go. I mean, you'll get a chance at there, Brandon. I see you shaking your head, but it's okay. We'll get back to you in a second, though. I don't think it's the most likely, but it's possible, right? I mean, there's not a huge sample set of data of a quarterback who went to a school, struggled, went to another school. There's not a huge data set of this. This is mostly a relatively new thing with the transfer portal. So we do have to consider that. They do have some interesting backup options. And I think this team is trending in the right is relatively trending in the right direction, and we need to see something from Billy Napier, and we need to see something from Graham Mertz. But I do have this team as stairs up. I think there was a lot of winnable games for them last season that they did lose, and I think this team could. I think this team could improve a little bit. This team is probably not going to knock off Georgia and not going to knock off Tennessee, and I think they probably play LSU because they always play LSU. They're not going to win those games, but could this team get to 8-4? Yeah, I think this team could get to 8-4.
All right. This is sad. This is my co-host. I love him, but Brendan, I guess can you just put him out of his misery? Just put him down.
Yeah, I don't think you can really compare. I know you're trying to hold on hope for Graham Mertz, but I don't think you can compare him and Bo Nix going to Oregon as apples to apples comparison. Bo Nix going to Oregon into a pass-friendly, quarterback-friendly offense under Kenny Dillingham last season is totally different than what Graham Mertz is walking into this year. I think Florida, Napier's going to want to pound the rock. I don't think they have the offensive line to do so in the SEC. I think they only return one starter up there. It's a patchwork O-line, in my opinion. A lot of transfers. We'll see if it works out or not. But this schedule is absolutely brutal, even in the non-conference. You got to go to Utah. You play Florida State, and obviously in conference, you got Georgia, you got Tennessee, you got LSU. I wouldn't be shocked to see them make a bowl. I think at best they go 7-5. I have them at 5-7.
I think they may get lucky because of Utah. They may not have to play against Cam Rising, so they might get lucky in that game. True. They might get a win there. But I agree with that. If not, that would probably be a loss. But I think they could get lucky in that game. But that's more of just a spot play, just because it's not Cam Rising. But no, it is tough. This is not a team that's going to win a championship yet. Maybe next year, but we'll see in the future. I mean, if they can figure out how to work NIL, maybe they could do in the future, but not currently, I don't think.
I will say, I do think Florida's got a bright future. I think Napier's recruiting at a really high level. I think next year and the year after, if they give him time, if the boosters, if the athletic board, if they're willing to give him time, I think Napier can build this the right way and be successful in the future. I just don't think it'll be this year.
Yeah. All right. Well, roughly Mertz and Richardson had the same passing efficiency. Richardson a little better last season. So the good news is, Robert, if Mertz is just the athlete that Richardson was, I think the offense is in great shape. To Brendan's point, Napier will want to run the ball, and if I combine my returning starts metric and my improvement metric, and I just combine those two, the only teams I have worse than Florida are Kent State, Colorado State, and Texas State. Two of those are new coaches that just cleared the deck on their whole horrible roster. Colorado State got one season and said, "Oh my gosh, this is like a year zero," and he cleared the deck himself. You might remember he brought in 4 guys from the portal. It's going to be really rough on offense. They took a step back on defense as well, and I'm not projecting any improvement. Two things. I actually will. I like Napier. I actually got my Louisiana shirt when I cashed a win total on them back in like 2019. Um, he had the proof of concept for the new head coach. The offense improved from a 3.2 to a 4.8, which is no small feat considering the quarterback really struggled to throw the ball accurately. And to Brendan's point, long term, I think he's a great hire. He's recruiting very well. He knows what he's doing. They need to give him the time, and they need to get that stupid collective that screwed up the Jaden Rashada thing. I don't know if they just disbanded after that, but that can't happen, and anybody that's blaming Napier for that just needs to seek a new line of work because it's not fair to him. That's there's purposely supposed to be a wall between the two, so you can't blame the coach for that. Okay, I will take Georgia. This is going to be kind of quick. I'm going to give you narrative A and narrative B. Narrative A is the quick one. The defense I had is 13th best overall in FBS. This is really quick. Kirby Smart's a great defensive coach. My improvement metric, I have Michigan in second in improvement metric coming into this season. The Michigan defense at 85. Georgia's is 105. That is by far the highest as long as I've been tracking this metric. So I kind of want to say podcast over because Georgia can't be beat. Their defense is going to be ridiculously good. The other side of that, the offense was good. They need to replace Bennett, and just to get into why I think this is an interesting team. If you go back to 2019, you think about where Georgia was. Great defense, but the knock on them was they need to take a step forward in their offense. They bring in one of the Munkins. I always get them confused because they both have
Todd.
4 letters in their first name. If that was Todd, okay. Thank you. They bring in Todd Monken for the COVID season. He didn't have enough time to really do all what he wanted to do on offense. You saw in 21 and 22, once he had his offense in place, what they could do. I mean, actually, last season, the offense was the strength of this team with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, which says a lot about, Monken's abilities. And he actually took Southern Miss from just 3 wins to undefeated in one season. The guy's a great coach. Now he's off to the NFL. Mike Bobo is the new offensive coordinator, and I would love to basically give truth serum or just a lot of alcohol to the serious Georgia fans and say, are you excited about this? Because I don't think he was particularly loved when he was the offensive coordinator under Mark Richt. He was the offensive coordinator for 2020 at South Carolina. I don't remember if you remember that season, but his offense has made a point of having long, drawn-out drives in the fourth quarter when they were down by 2 or 3 scores and just draining the clock and helping the other team. I had them rated as a minus 4.3 offensively. He followed that by 2021. He was forced upon Brian Harsin at Auburn. That clearly did not go well. Here's the good news. He said, hey, I won't change anything about this offense, which – it's easy to say, but if Vogue magazine made me the editor-in-chief, I can say I won't change anything about it, but it doesn't mean I'm going to know what I'm doing. I think that there is a case that all the new pieces, especially Bobo, breaking in a new quarterback that really hasn't played much, there's a path where they might lose 1 or even 2 games, and nobody seems to think that 2 losses is possible, but it'll be interesting. I can kind of see a dueling banjos between the defense doing something and the offense doing something bad. Am I just off base here, Brendan?
No, I think you're dead on. I think Georgia's pretty stacked at every position. I think wide receiver is the position I'm most concerned about relative to the other positions on the team. But you still got Lad McConkey returning. But at tight end, I think you're set because you got Brock Bowers, you got
Yeah.
Oscar Delp. Uh, I don't know, man. I just don't see anyone on this schedule beating them. And the schedule's pretty light compared to other SEC schedules. Well, Georgia doesn't have to play themselves, so that's good for them. And their
Yeah.
toughest game's at Tennessee and at
Hmm.
Auburn. Maybe it's their second toughest game. I don't really see a loss here.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I see a potential upset there when we get to a different team. So I kind of be contrarian. I kind of believe in my case. I kind of don't. I don't know. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I do have Georgia as stairs down. The problem is that when you go undefeated in the SEC, like the thing is there is such a big difference between them and the next best SEC team that like stairs down, but like even if you're down, how much like how you're not still that much closer to the other teams. Um, I mean, Tennessee
Yeah.
does present a threat. Florida doesn't. Kentucky doesn't. Auburn doesn't. Maybe South Carolina. There were some interesting results last year. This team beat Missouri by 4 in what is a very weird result.
Yeah, that
That
was a weird game.
at the same time destroying Tennessee by 14. Um, they only beat Florida by 22 points when the spread was 23. They only beat Kentucky by 10 points when the spread was 22. They only beat Georgia Tech by 23 points when the spread was, I look like 36. So there was a lot of weirdly close games last year. They have lost a lot on defense, right? They've lost Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. They lost a lot of pieces, specifically to the Philadelphia Eagles, which is rare. You usually don't have a transfer portal to the NFL, but I guess Georgia does. Congratulations to them. Um, but no, I have concerns about this. Carson Beck, okay, yeah, Stetson Bennett was good, but weirdly good because people were like, he's not actually that good, but he was good enough, I guess. He looked not horrible with the Rams in that preseason game, but I have questions about this guy. I mean, if this guy's played, like he's played college before, but the entire playing experience has been coming in as cleanup in the fourth quarter in some blowouts. So he's playing against second stringers. So, not really the most happy with that. Additionally, you're even looking at the fact that if he like it was well known that Kirby Smart was not the biggest fan of Stetson Bennett. I mean, he doesn't need to be particularly loyal to any of his quarterbacks. He wasn't particularly loyal to JT Daniels. JT Daniels was gone. Not particularly loyal to Bennett. But the thing is, if Carson Beck was so good, why didn't you replace Bennett? Bennett was like he was like a super senior there. He was like probably could have graduated if this kid could have outplayed him. I feel like he would have, right? So I think we're saying like this guy is definitely worse than Bennett at least. They keep Brock Bowers, but they lose a couple other pieces. Like this team is going to be very, very different than the team that won in 21, and even to some extent the team that won in 22. So can they do well? Yes, but I think there is a chance that. I mean, here's the problem with this is how the problem with the SEC is this: they lose to Tennessee, they may not go to the SEC championship game, right? Like that's a fact, and that's kind of insane, but that's how this goes, right? So I can see a loss on this schedule. I think there could be a loss somewhere, but I kind of do agree that, and again, the loss of Todd Monken is pretty big, right? This team had a problem on offense. They finally get someone to fix that. That person is now gone, right? So I feel like Georgia can become a bit of a victim to their own success. And I mean, Brock Bowers is a big piece, but there are questions as to how big of a piece that is, especially if you're really questioning about quarterback. So I think this team can win the SEC East, but I think if Joe Milton is pretty good at Tennessee, I think they could give them a run for their money.
So, even money, yes, no. Do they lose a game this season in the regular season?
Well, the line is minus 140. They do. What is it? Let me call up the line right here. Let me so plus 120 over 11.5, 11.5 under minus 140. I would be on the under on that. I think they lose a game.
Interesting.
But that's betting value because I just think, and again, the thing is, just because we can't see a loss doesn't mean there won't be a loss. I mean, like, look, last year, the loss against Missouri, at Missouri, they were 29-point favorites, almost lost that game, right? Just because you don't see a loss on the schedule doesn't mean there won't be one. This is college football.
Yeah, they do. I always look for that first conference road game, and it's at Auburn, which I think is a lucky break, a really lucky schedule break. Okay. So the team that would probably supplant them if Georgia slips is Tennessee. You want to take them, Robert?
Yes. Yes. So I have Tennessee as lobby, mostly just because they were already one of the best teams in the conference last year. So you can't really go that much. You can't go that much higher. You can't go that much lower. Um, Joe Milton might actually be pretty good, right? We actually saw him a little bit in the last couple of games. If it wasn't for that fluke upset against South Carolina, this team would have been a playoff team. They would have been in ahead of Ohio State in the playoffs, and they would have gotten a rematch against Georgia. Maybe they could have done something there. Because, like, although they lost to Georgia, they didn't lose to Georgia by 14. If you game plan a bit, maybe you could take them out. Something, I don't know. But then they basically were mad, and then they showed their anger. They took out their anger against Vanderbilt, beating them 55-0. So that was very clearly we screwed up, and we feel really bad about that. Um, I really do believe in Josh Heupel. I think he has finally built a really good SEC team, and that is hard to do, as we've talked about here in this podcast. I think he's really good. I think this is the future of the SEC East. I think it's going to be between him and Kirby Smart and potentially Billy Napier if they could figure out in Florida. I think this is probably the next best coach in the SEC East next to Kirby Smart.
All right, I'm gonna make a case here, and I'm gonna start it with a question. So last year, Hooker, he averaged 9.4 yards per attempt, which is just insane. So if he averages 8 yards an attempt, this team it's probably not just as flashy. I think they are probably losing a few more games because it just becomes a different looking offense. I guess would you guys agree with that? Just you need the top end quarterback play for this thing to kind of work. I don't. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, and I bring this up because Hooker's apex last season was 160, and he was just overlooked. At 2019 at Virginia Tech, his apex was a 162, and he was in the 160s in 2021. And I bring this up because Joe Milton, as a starter at Tennessee, his apex is a 109. If you take away that bowl game where they went nuts, it falls to an 89. I if so I'm thinking if I'm being as generous as possible and saying he just, in his second time around in this offense, maybe he improves to an 8.0, that gets him generously to about the highest apex progression that I can see. And I think that just kind of just takes this team a pretty decent step back. I think they're probably going to lose 2 or 3 games is how I see it. I have all the respect for Heupel. That offense is just a bear, but I don't think it's nearly as impossible when Joe Milton runs it compared to Hendon Hooker. And a lot of that's because I think Hooker just got completely overlooked until he basically grabbed the narrative. One other thing about this team, there is a real FU in their schedule here. They're at Alabama on the 21st of October, and then the very next week they're at Kentucky, who I think is going to be sneaky good. That is the absolute getting punched in the face right as you exhale game. Keep an eye out for that one. So I'm a lot more bearish than Robert is on this. What do you think, Brendan?
I'm with you. I think the quarterback play is going to downgrade this year. And also the wide receivers. They lose 2 NFL draft picks, Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, I believe. They still got some guys like Squirrel White, Brew McCoy, and Ramel Keaton, but I don't think they're going to be as good at the receiver position. If you recall, Hyatt, he's the one that had, I think, 5 touchdowns against Bama. So I think he's going to be a huge loss. And receivers, their impact is heightened in Josh Heupel's offense. They rely a lot on those receivers. I think Milton's not as good of a quarterback as Hooker, like you mentioned. I won't get into that too much. I'm not very high on Tennessee this year. I still think they'll have a good season. I have them at 8-4.
Wow, line it up with me. I love it. I feel so smart.
And I like how you highlighted that Kentucky game. I think is huge for that second place in the SEC East because I'm high on Kentucky too. So I think I'm favoring Kentucky in that game because they're coming off a bye when they're playing Tennessee, and they'll be at home. As you mentioned, Tennessee is going to be on the road at Alabama the week before, so that's going to be a key game this year.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's talk about Kentucky. I have them as a stairs up team. You kind of hit on this already, Brendan, so I don't repeat it. But just you know what? Guess what? Will Levis wasn't that good, and before last season, Robert, you and I both talked about this that we were kind of Will Levis skeptics. You know, I guess long story short, you can't beat out Sean Clifford. I think you've got a ceiling that maybe other people didn't see. His apex last season was 109. Now, in fairness, he didn't have the good OC. He got the non-Liam Cohen OC, replaced by Devin Leary, as we mentioned earlier on. Devin Leary's apex in the last two seasons before 22 was a 118 and a 120 at NC State. Pardon me. I think he's going into a much better situation here. Now he's going to be facing some tougher offenses. He was hurt last season, but you know I love the new OC. They retained 95% of their Ryan from last season. Now none of those guys were in the top 100 for players last season, but I think that Cohen will make them a little more explosive. I have them also on the offensive line is by far the most experienced in the SEC East. I know they lose Christopher Rodriguez, but I think that's probably he had a subpar season. They were actually the worst running game in the SEC last season by my metrics. I think that the better offensive line and the new OC fixed that. Sneakily, only Bama I had them better versus the pass last year. They return enough experience to maintain the same level of play. And as you mentioned, Brendan, you know, Stoops is just a proven, especially defensive coach. I don't really have any problems, any concerns about his defense just really tanking any season. I just don't see it happening. The total for this team is 7. It's even on both, or it's minus 110 on both sides. I have them favored in 8 games. I think they're the most fluid team in a conference that's really not noted for fluidity. I ran my numbers on them last night, and they're going to be one of my season total win bets over the 7. Brendan, sounds like you agree with me, so let's see if before we get to you, if Robert agrees or if he's going to disagree with me.
On Kentucky, I actually do have this team as wait a second. I have this kind of lobby / stairs down. The thing is, I do like Leary more. I prefer Leary as the quarterback, but the problem is I have concerns about the coaching, about Mark Stoops. This team lost and was competitive in a lot of winnable games last year. Again, almost losing to Northern Illinois, that was inexcusable. Lost to Mississippi State by 3, lost to South Carolina by 10, got blown out by Tennessee last year, lost to Vanderbilt, and then weirdly was close to Georgia, but the point is, though, there's a lot of games in there that they should have won, and they should have won easily. And if you're competing in the SEC, you can't have this. You can't have just random games where you're like, let's let Northern Illinois stay with us late. Like, you can't do that. You have to put these teams away. Now, part of that could have been Will Levis. That's fine. But even the Florida game, right? Like, I mean, they only beat Florida by 9. Yeah, 10. They beat Florida by 10. Which now what we know about Florida, if Kentucky was really one of those top teams, that should have been a lot. They should have easily won that game. And even then, they got blown out by Iowa in the bowl, which is kind of insane. I think it was like 21-0, which was a crazy stat line. Okay, yes, you lost Will Levis. He was preparing for the draft. That's fine. But, like, that's inexcusable. You're telling me your backups can't beat Iowa? Like, that's really concerning to me. So, I think I have a lot of concerns about this team. I think this team is going to basically stay the same or could potentially regress. I know Leary's an upgrade, but I just need to see this coaching staff make an upgrade on it. Like, we've seen this team. This team was horrible. Then they added Mark Stoops. Then they've improved a bit. But this team has not like made that step up yet, and we need to see that this year.
All right, Brendan, just be gentle when you tell Robert how wrong he is, okay?
Yeah, it seems like I'm going against Robert on all these teams, but I truly believe Kentucky's going to finish second in the SEC East. I'm going to say that. I like the offensive line this year. I think they return 4 starters. They bring back Liam Cohen as offensive coordinator, who was there, I believe, in 2021. So I think the
Yep.
offense will be much better this year without Levis. I think the run game will improve even without Chris Rodriguez because I think Ray Davis they got from Vandy. I think he's a stud. Uh, I think that the defense returns a lot as well. They return the three linebackers and just the schedule. The first they can really uh,
Yeah.
the first 5 games are very winnable. You got Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, Vanderbilt, Florida. First 5 games. I think if you start 5-0, I think there's a good chance that they do start 5-0. Then you work out all those kinks in those first 3 games, especially against weaker competition. I think this team can win 8 to 9 games.
We agree. Okay. Maybe maybe Brendan will agree with you on LSU, Robert.
Yeah, so I have LSU as stairs up. So as we've kind of all mentioned, we all kind of think Daniels might be the best quarterback in the SEC. I think we're all kind of there. One other thing I'd love to highlight here is about Brian Kelly. So as we know that the LSU added Brian Kelly last year, before he was the head coach of Notre Dame for a very long time. Um, Basically, I wanted to kind of uh, to show you roughly what had happened. So after LSU won the national championship game with the Joe Burrow team in 19, and they went 5-5 in the COVID shortened year in 20, 6-7 in 21. So basically, after they lost all that draft capital, so they lost Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase opted out a year. They lost Justin Jefferson that year. They lost the running back. I can't remember what his name is. He went to the Chiefs. But after that talent, they were basically a 500 team. Then next year, after 1 year of rebuilding, Brian Kelly got them to 10-4. Just after 1 year. And the thing is, Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, he was always a good coach at Notre Dame. He'd randomly get them to the college football playoff every couple of years because he'd win games. He'd get a team to 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 sometimes, right? He'd get them to this level and the thing is sometimes they'd win it. Their non-conference schedule would be pretty easy and they'd get to like the 12-0, or maybe they'd lose to a random good team on the schedule like a Clemson or something. But then there's the arguments like, well, their only losses to Clemson, and Clemson's going to the playoff, so we as well put Notre Dame in there too. The argument for Notre Dame the argument against Notre Dame always was that they're a good team, but they're just not strong enough to compete with the top teams. And the argument for the reason for that was because they can't recruit, because you need academics to get into Notre Dame. So therefore, there is a massive pool of players Brian Kelly couldn't recruit to go to Notre Dame to put them over that top. That's not an issue anymore. He's now at LSU, and in 1 year he took this team from basically a 500 team to the SEC championship game, knocking off Bama, and you're now giving this guy another full year, potentially the best quarterback in the SEC, and it's like I think with the tools that Brian Kelly has, I think this team could definitely win the SEC West. I think they're the favorites to win the SEC West, and I think there's a chance this team could go to the college football playoff this year. I think you give them another full year of improvement, I think this team could be really good.
Yeah, you're nodding a lot there. You any points of disagreement or any additional color you got on that one, Brendan?
I am. I agree with Robert on this one. I think LSU, the turnaround they had in year 1 under Brian Kelly, just shows the talent that LSU has at their disposal. Just being in the location conference they play in, fertile recruiting ground down in Baton Rouge, and just the coaching ability of Kelly is pretty much unmatched in college football. It's one of the best. So I think LSU, they could be the best program in the SEC if they get all their eggs in line. You know what I mean? So I think LSU this season, my one concern is all the transfers that they landed. We've seen the transfer portal work and not work with teams. Michigan State, my team, that 2021, 11 wins. A lot of transfer portal guys. Last season, a lot of transfer portal guys, 5 wins. So a couple of stats here. Defensive line, they added 5 Power 5 transfers on the defensive line alone.
Jesus.
In the secondary, they added 5 transfer cornerbacks. Just cornerbacks, they added 5 transfers there. So you got to get the transfers to gel. But I do think this team has the talent to win a national championship this year. I'm not picking that. I think they go 11-1 with the only loss against Bama. I think they're a playoff contender.
I agree, and just to the point that you both said about Brian Kelly just wins football games. you know, I started tracking a luck metric a few years ago, and in all 3 seasons, there's only 2 coaches that have had good luck for each of their teams for their team each of the 3 seasons. He's one of them, and at that point, he doesn't even get like the elite quarterback play where you can say, oh, it's the quarterback. It's just he just wins football games. It's amazing. Um, the conference schedule is a mixed blessing. It's interesting. They pick up Missouri and Florida from the East, which I think is about as good a draw as you can get if you're not getting Vandy. But they they play at Alabama and Mississippi, which is, I mean, if you believe in Mississippi, that's a rough draw. One other thing, and I actually have, we all had LSU as the top quarterback room. I dug a little deeper on the Jaden Daniels performance, and I think he might actually become the limiting factor of this team just because his apex was only 107 last season for the entire season. Versus SEC defenses, it was a 93. And in the last 4 against SEC defenses, it was a 70. Now, I don't know if was he hurt at some point. I vaguely remember like he had an injury at some point. Did he miss a game or like did he have some kind of ankle injury?
He was injured in the SEC
Maybe
championship game, but
that's
I
it.
think
Okay.
but that was in the championship game though, and maybe he did have an injury
Yeah.
earlier in the season too, though. I think.
Yeah, but I mean that's just that's scary. So I don't know if maybe the SEC, every program has like 142 analysts that study film all the time, so maybe they caught on to him by the end of the season. That might be the limiting factor, but I'm a huge believer in Brian Kelly, so it sounds like we all believe in LSU. All right. So one of the tough road games that I think for them, Ole Miss, I have them as stairs up. I agree that Jackson Dart was not really awesome last season. His apex was 106 for the whole season versus the SEC was only 91. The thesis here on offense is they had the best running game by my metrics in the SEC last season, and I'm thinking that they added 2 top receivers that I had in the top 50 in player Ryan. Zachary Franklin from UTSA and Trey Harris from Louisiana Tech. I'm thinking that maybe a little more explosiveness on the outside maybe can kind of help things. It's surprising, and maybe the problem was just Jackson Dart. But if you're going to have 2 explosive guys on the outside and Quinshon Judkins as your running back, I think your offense can be a real nightmare to face. The defense was not good last season. It was like almost USC level of bad. Fred Golding should be an upgraded defensive coordinator. This is a really, really interesting. If you think LSU had a lot of transfers, a lot of those transfers are basically projected to start for Ole Miss. And I hope I convey this effectively. I'm going to try here. So in all of FBS, only 10 defenses return fewer starts from last year's defense on that team, if that makes sense. So a lot of guys left or were run off or whatever. However, in FBS, no team has more career starts projected on their starting 11. Means that they brought in not just a bunch of guys, but a bunch of guys that actually started everywhere else. This is not just taking leftovers that couldn't cut it somewhere else. There are a ton of career starts that they bring on this defense. And I think maybe with Golding, you could see that the defense is just good enough to pull an upset or 2. I don't think I'm going to play the over 7.5 wins. It's just tough. They are the only team that plays at Alabama and at Georgia because I guess the SEC just hates Lane Kiffin. What's interesting too is when they're at Alabama on September 23rd, that's going to be whoever is the quarterback there. That's going to be that quarterback's first conference game. Maybe just a sneaky angle, not for an outright win, but at least an easier cover than we expect for the Rebels. So I'm pretty bullish on the Rebels. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I'm going to highlight a point like I did with LSU. This team's got a ton of transfers. They got to gel together. We'll see how it works out. But overall, the talent that they have, I think, is really good. Quarterback, we talked about that already. I don't think they're at an elite level in terms of quarterback play. I think you saw that kind of affect the offensive philosophy last year. You saw them pound the rock a little bit more. Quinshon Judkins is a stud. I think he's going to have another great year. But behind him, you still got Ulysses Bentley from SMU, who's also really good. Wide receiver, Zachary Franklin from UTSA, he's really good. Trey Harris from Louisiana Tech, he's really good. So they got the offensive playmakers. My worry is the defense. Also returned 4 starters on the O line. My worry is the defense. I mean, they weren't very good last year, and if they're going to win 9 to 10 games this year, I think their ceiling's probably 9 or 10 wins. If they're going to hit that, I do think they need to improve on the defensive side, but I do think offense you're going to see a little bit more balance this year between pass and run as opposed to just run heavy like it was last year.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with you guys on Ole Miss. I actually do have them as stairs up. So one of the things I really like was, so this team obviously went to the, I believe it was the Sugar Bowl in 21, or well, it was the 22 Sugar Bowl after the 2021 season with Matt Corral. And that was kind of like a peak year for them. They did a really, really good year. They didn't make the playoffs, but basically that when you're going to the Sugar Bowl and you're the number one SEC team that's not going to the playoff, that's a really good year. That's probably one of the best years you can have for a non-Alabama, non-Georgia program. So then the thing is, then they lose Matt Corral to the NFL. Okay, so the problem is for a lot of these teams, and we've seen a lot of this, they lose their top star player and then they just immediately collapse, right? Fortunately, Michigan State is an example of that last year. But there's lots of examples of this, and that's not just Michigan State. There's a lot of examples of teams losing their star player and instantly collapsing after that. They didn't collapse. They went 8-5, and they actually came close to knocking off Bama, which would have been a very impressive 9-4. I think they were close in a couple other games there as well. They weirdly lost to Mississippi State. I'm not sure how they did that, but had they not lost to Mississippi State, they would have gotten 10-4 again, 10-3 again. So, very, very interesting team. I think that they're probably going to get an upset or two this year. I think Alabama is potentially there for the taking. With Matt Corral, they really got blown out by Bama that season. They got blown out by Bama 42-21 that year. This year they got even closer. This year maybe potentially they could beat Bama. I don't know. Question marks about Jackson Dart. I'm not the most confident in Jackson Dart, but I think he could potentially be a good piece for them long term. But we'll have to see. But I'm pretty high on this team. I think this could be one of the better teams in the SEC West. I don't think they're up there with Bama with LSU, but they could potentially knock off Bama. So